breaking news, President Trump has announced that he will have a phone call with Putin on Monday and with Zelensky and with NATO leaders. So one of the things we had talked about on our show earlier today was that Trump needed to take some decisive action, and it appears that's exactly what he's going to do, or at least it's got the possibility for that. We'll have to wait and see, of course, what comes out of those meetings. But there's been some other information out too. First of all, since we were on the air, the senior Russian member of the delegation that went to Istanbul, Medinsky, said that both sides had agreed to submit ceasefire proposals to each other. So that was something that wasn't announced earlier, or at least I hadn't seen it, which was very important, because if both sides are talking about, all right, we want a ceasefire, because that's what the Western side has been demanding for quite some time. And then now the Russians, who had categorically said, no, we won't do that. Well, I guess not categorically. They said unless there were some significant conditions that had been attached to it, they wouldn't do an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. But now they're saying, all right, tell you what, we'll give our proposals, you give us your proposals. So again, anything that's talking and with the two sides specifically of the warring parties are in communication with each other, that's a good thing. And if both sides are going to submit their conditions, who knows, maybe there's going to be some room for some compromises on each side to get to that. Anything that ends the killing, and especially if it leads to ending the war, I am all for. Peskov, for his point, also added, this was definitely today, so this is new information. Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin, has said that a Putin and Zelensky meeting is indeed possible. So you remember again that Zelensky had demanded that Putin meet with him personally on Thursday in Istanbul earlier in the week, and obviously that was never going to happen. But now then Peskov is saying, well, that's not categorically no. We will meet him under certain conditions. And they didn't say what those conditions were, but presumably those were also shared between the two working level delegations. Then just about 40 minutes after we went off the air, I saw this headline pop up. It said Trump said he will call Putin, followed by Zelensky on Monday to discuss war in Ukraine. That was probably drafted off of a Truth Social that Trump put out shortly before we went on the air. And he said, I will be speaking by telephone to President Vladimir Putin of Russia on Monday at 10 a.m. The subject of the call will be stopping the bloodbath that is killing on average more than 5,000 Russians and Ukrainians a week, and trade. I will then be speaking to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and then with President Zelensky, various members of NATO. Hopefully it will be a productive day. A ceasefire will take place. And this very violent war, a war that should never have happened, will end. God bless us all. And that is, of course, really good news, because if you're talking about ending the war, and if he's claiming now that there's going to be some kind of end of negotiations, that's certainly good. If it's going to have a ceasefire, now we have said that there is no order. We did say that earlier today. There's no required order. You can have a ceasefire and then talk negotiations. You can have negotiations and then in place a ceasefire. Everything is possible. But now then, everything seems to be on the table. Now, with all of this, as I say all the time, words matter. They are important. These words are significant, but they have to be followed up with action. And what President Trump is going to have to do, I think he's going to have to tell whatever he's going to say with Putin. And I can't imagine them coming off those harsh issues. You may recall that we said earlier today in our first edition that what was reported from the Russian side was that they demand a full military evacuation of all four of the oblasts that Russia has annexed. There will be no NATO, no military alliance with anybody. There will be no claims for reparations. All countries must recognize Crimea and the four oblasts, and the rights of Russian-speaking people have to be agreed to. Those are the things that the Russian side said came out of the meeting, while they said they were encouraged by the meeting, etc. It seems pretty unlikely that Putin, with Russia, Trump on the phone, will budge much unless he had some other minimum requirement that he had, and so asked for all those extras so then he could, quote, come down and compromise in order to reach some issue. We never know where the current standards are, but there is no, and this is important to understand, there is no compulsion that Trump can bring to bear, even with sanctions, that the European, even with promise of more military support, any of that kind of stuff, that you can compel Russia to back down really on any of those issues here. Now, you may not get them, like especially the one there about the world has to recognize as Russian territory those oblasts. Nobody else has to do any of that. There's no Russia doesn't have any compulsion to do that. They don't have any leverage. They can ask for it, but only the others can give it, and Russia can't demand that they do. But some of the other things, especially about saying, look, if there's not going to be any NATO, that Russia does have the ability, because if they don't get that, they have the capacity to continue marching forward and going up the Dnieper River, going up to the gates of Kiev itself over time, even if that took a year, maybe even more. They have the wherewithal to do that. So it remains to be seen how much Putin is willing to compromise. But we just have to be sober-minded on this. Trump doesn't have a lot of room. There's not a lot of room for negotiation on this, because he just doesn't have much leverage to compel anything with Russia. He has the ability to influence some things. He does, and he can actually use positive carrots, so to speak, to actually encourage Putin to go down some path to maybe back off on some of these issues, but only a little bit. And whatever he comes out with there, and let's just say, if Putin has the hard line and says, no, those are my conditions, all of them, or we're going to keep fighting, there's really very little Trump can do. And then when he gets on the phone with Zelensky afterwards and with the NATO leaders, I just don't know what they would do, how they would react if Trump says any version of these conditions that Russia has said that they wanted in Istanbul yesterday. So it's great that they're talking. It's great, and we celebrate this, that Putin and Trump are going to talk, and we hope this leads to an in-person meeting, because if there's an in-person meeting, and also encouraging that Russia has said that they're willing to have a Putin and Zelensky meeting, it's encouraging on all of that, as long as the Western side, the Europeans, and Zelensky can be, even if compelled, to accede to whatever the terms turn out to be. Because listen, I've said this before, and nothing has changed in this regard. There's only an ugly deal for Ukraine. There is no good deal. There's just either ugly or it can get even worse. They still face the specter of either agreeing to negotiations, what the Russians are asking for, in an ugly situation, or reject that and continue fighting and end up eventually suffering a military defeat. The conditions have always, from the time we've started this up until now, they always go in one direction, and that is worse for the Ukraine side. From the Minsk agreements to the December 2021 offer to the Istanbul 2022 to the offer, well, it wasn't really an offer, but the possibility in 2023 after the failed offensive, to the June 14, 2024 terms that were set, to the ones that are on the table now. Every single time they get more draconian, because Russian power grows, Russian forces move forward, and the Ukraine side gets weaker. Those trends are all going to continue if there's no deal here. And that's why I say the best leadership thing that President Trump can do, the most moral thing, the most ethical thing, and the most effective thing that Trump can do is when he gets on that phone with all those leaders on Monday, is to say, this is the best deal you're going to get, folks. Y'all either accept it here or I'm going to walk. And I hope, they've been talking about this for over a month. I hope that today, this meeting right here, these series of phone calls on Monday are going to be the decision point, are going to be the inflection point to where everything changes now. And that the president says, y'all do it or we walk. There's no other viable path for the United States. They can continue pretending that everything's, still up for grabs. Trump can come out and do what Lindsey Graham wants to do and say, we're going to throw more sanctions on you if you don't agree to what we want. He can do all those things. It won't change the outcome on the ground. It won't change the battlefield. That's what everybody needs to understand. And if we go down that second path, all we're going to do is condemn more Ukraine people to certain death and more loss of territory, because there is nothing on the ground that I can even see in the potential in the peripheral areas that anyone can apply that could change anything on the ground. There is nothing except for escalating the war or seeing the Ukraine side ground down. But there's nothing that could push back or reverse the Russian gains or compel them to give in to something that the Western/Ukraine side wants. That's what we need to understand. So great that Trump is going to do this. I just hope that he I hope that he's recognizing the things that we keep pointing out here, that I know people on his staff are telling him, I know his intelligence officials are telling him, because he can certainly see those things. He knows the power dynamics. And I think he's coming to the same conclusion that we observed earlier today, that he's running out of options here, and that if he doesn't take decisive action and show leadership, that he's going to potentially be seen as incapable of bringing anyone to any tables, and then just being a sideline as the war continues on. I don't think that's in his interest. I don't think that's in his character. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on Monday, because it could be a really big day. And that anything that stops the killing, he keeps focused on that. He said it in the Truth Social. I'm 100% in support of that, and I hope that's exactly where it leads. Well, anyway, that was just a short one there for you, but I wanted to bring you update because that's additional information we didn't have when we made our show earlier today at 11 a.m. And we're going to continue monitoring this through the weekend, and if anything else breaks, we'll bring that to you as well. But you can definitely count on Monday. We will be bringing you a show to whatever kind of results these shows have. 10 o'clock on Monday is what President Trump said he's going to be talking to Vladimir Putin, and we'll see what happens from that. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.